Kovatch, the Associate Program Director for the Blue Ridge Music Center. I'd like to welcome you to the discussion series, A Place in the Band, Women in Bluegrass and American Roots Music. This series is part of a project by the Blue Ridge Music Center that began in 2020 to honor the 100th anniversary of women being granted the right to vote. A Place in the Band celebrates the triumphs and explores the struggles faced by women in bluegrass and American roots music. In this discussion series, North Carolina singer-songwriter and social activist Laurelyn Dossett speaks with women in the music business, including musicians and others involved in music management and promotion roles. Through these conversations, the women share their stories, talking about their role models, mentors, and inspirations, experiences with people they've worked with, issues they've encountered that are specific to women in the industry, changes they've seen over the years, and other parts of their own personal journeys that have helped them to be who they are today. These individual stories show us the collective strength and future possibilities for women in bluegrass and American roots music. I hope you enjoyed the series, and thank you for joining us.
Hello, my name is Laurelyn Dossett, and today we're talking with TRACI Thomas of TRACI Thomas Management. From her early days doing publicity for Merlefest and multiple bluegrass and Americana artists, she's moved into artist management, working with John Moreland, St. Paul and the Broken Bones, and Jason Isbell. Being an artist manager is another one of those jobs that's behind the scenes. If you're a music fan, which I'm assuming a lot of you are, it's not a job you see, but it's a super important job. If you're an artist, your job is to make music, make records, write songs, practice your instrument, be a creator. But to be a person who does that in this business, there's all this other stuff that has to happen. So many answering of email and press requests and booking and scheduling, and artists can't do that alone. So that's one, those sorts of daily minutia, that's part of what an artist manager does. Bigger picture, an artist manager is an advocate for the artist and for the music. You will not find a more fierce advocate for music and for her artists than TRACI Thomas. I wanted to just start with, a lot of the folks who are going to be watching this today don't know what artist management is. They don't know what people like you do every day. Can you just kind of introduce your role in the business?
Yes, I back in fall of 2014, I taught at University of Georgia in their music business program. And so I taught their very first class on artist management. And the way that I would describe this to people, or I describe it to people that don't understand the business, is that I'm the quarterback.
Right.
I'm the one kind of calling all the plays and dealing with the booking agents. And that's booking agents in the US and in Europe. I'm dealing with attorneys, with record labels, with publicists. And so you're the one that's like the quarterback, like kind of coordinating all the plays.
Right. But you have a goal in mind. So it's not just you're coordinating the plays, like you're working with the artist to say, what's the plan? Like what is it that we're trying to do here? Right?
Yeah, but that's usually me. I mean, sometimes each artist is different.
Yeah.
Some artists are more involved than others.
Right.
But yeah, it's usually kind of, and it's also something else I taught is finding a manager that has similar sensibilities as you. So that way you kind of think along the same lines. And so you're ultimately, hopefully that means your goals are because you're the face of the artist.
Right.
And so that artist needs to make sure whoever's representing them is, doing that in the best possible way, like the way that they want to be represented.
Right, exactly. So on a typical day, which I know is a ridiculous question, on a typical day, what are the many, what's the range of tasks that you might do in a day?
Well, dealing with the booking agent, talking about shows, and, Jason Isbell is one of my clients, and we have started doing some social distance shows that have been successful, and he feels comfortable. And, but that's been a process of making sure that the venues and the promoters are doing the right thing and making sure that because it's important for us that everyone is safe, not just Jason, not just our crew, but the audience. We don't want to be responsible for anyone getting sick.
Right.
But the booking agent is kind of all of our bread and butter. So they're the first call and email that I'm going to return.
Right.
I might be dealing with the attorneys on various contracts or issues, like doing a baseball card on Jason. So we've been dealing, and our attorney's like, I've never done this kind of deal before. We also have a documentary in the works on him. So, been dealing with the documentary maker and the filmmaker, and, right now I feel like I'm, kind of helping produce this documentary, because I'm pulling together all kinds of archival stuff for him. Right. Dealing with press requests, just whatever, it's just whatever's coming at you. Like we're getting ready to record a cover of another band, and setting up a session, booking the studio and the musicians and the engineer and all that good stuff.
Right.
We've got a soundtrack in the works, and I'm waiting to hear back on, they wanted someone else to mix it. So, in the process of making sure that deal gets wrapped up, and that they get what they need in a timely fashion. And of course, these days it's about also submitting videos, which has become our new job. Most of it, earlier it was a lot of political stuff, but mainly now it's all like fundraising kind of stuff. And that Jason's, very gracious about using his time and recording videos, whether it be the same song, he records a new video each time that we submit for a new request.
Nice. I get it.
Yeah.
So thanks for explaining that. Because again, I think a lot of folks, maybe particularly in more of the folk, less big record side of things, don't really think about agents and how you, kind of run the world. So how did you get there? What was your career trajectory?
I started out as a publicist. In college, I decided that I had to work the rest of my life, that the music business looked like fun. Mm-hmm. Even though I grew up in Nashville, I didn't grow up around it at all.
Okay.
So I just, once I got to college, my boyfriend in college was in the recording industry program at MTSU, and I was like, this music business thing looks kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. So I changed my degree from interior design to public relations, because this was, early 90s, where everybody was having a PR department. And I thought, if I couldn't get a job in the industry, I could probably get a job at a PR department.
Right. Okay.
I just didn't feel like I needed to get too specific at that time, because it wasn't like I was just a huge music head at that point.
Right.
So I got a degree in public relations and got an internship that led to my first job.
Which was where?
My internship was at Gurley & Company with Kathy Gurley. Essentially, Liberty Records, eventually it was Capitol Records, it became Liberty Records, and then back to Capitol Records, but Liberty was the Nashville arm of Capitol Records.
Okay.
And we were outside publicists, but essentially the in-house PR department.
Okay.
And then when Kathy, they made Kathy an offer to come just be in-house. And I was still in college at the time, so it wasn't that big of a deal, but another publicist there, Kate Richardson, went to work for a woman named Joan Myers, mm-hmm. and opened up Myers Media in Nashville. And and Kate said, I think I can get you on there. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, the girl that was kind of acting as the assistant, walked out on a Tuesday, and I walked in on a Friday.
Right.
And I worked there for a few years, and then eventually broke out on my own and started my own PR company called Grassroots Media.
Right. Okay.
And essentially became, really the first national bluegrass publicist.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'm remembering that. I think Grassroots is when I first met you. Yeah. So I just want to, this whole discussion about women in this business, is operating on the premise that that there may or may not be difficulties or other hurdles or things that make it hard or different to be a woman in this business. And so I'm really interested to hear you describe that very beginning, that you started out working for women-owned businesses from the beginning.
It's funny. I never really thought about that.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, just or really, really haven't. So yeah, I personally don't like. There have been some challenges, but like, I guess I just always thought I could do whatever I set my mind to. You
Right.
know, I think I was like 27 or 28 when I started Grassroots. Like, I just had this drive and I just did it.
Right.
And just kept my head down and worked my butt off and didn't worry about all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just didn't really think about being a woman doing it. I
Right.
just, you know, and my whole goal, my whole career is just to do whatever was best for the artist.
Right. Right.
You know, and granted, I hit walls at times where people, you know, I'm sure I've been called a bitch more times than I could count, but, you know, but ultimately, like, everything I've ever done is for what was best for my artist.
Right. So from Grassroots, where you were doing publicity for bluegrass artists at
Well, in Americana.
Americana, yeah.
Yeah.
But doing publicity and getting into actually managing artists is not the same thing. So what was that? What was that trajectory?
I think I just started getting a little burnout, like when I look back at it. And I also wanted a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think it just, like anytime like the most stressful jobs list comes out, a publicist is usually in the top 5 or 10 at least.
Okay.
And it's just intense. You have a lot of people pulling at you. You have, you know, the artist, the manager, the label, you know, the publications, everybody wanting something from you.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and I always, you know, it was always hard to, like, you know, stop what was coming at you and make sure you would put time aside to pitch.
Right.
Because sometimes it's just like, you've got all these people going, what's going on? What's going on? It's like, well, I can't do my job because you're bothering me.
Right.
You know, like,
right.
So I think, but it was, and because I always worked with a lot of independent artists, I felt like I always did more than just publicity.
Mm-hmm.
And at a certain point, I think I just decided that it was time that I, A, get paid for that, and B, I want to just expand my skill set, really.
It was a natural progression.
It felt like it. And I know, like, a lot of other publicists that have become managers. So yeah, it was a real natural progression. And for a while, I juggled both. Because my first management client was Justin Townes Earl.
Okay.
And when he started, of course, it was very much developmental, and I needed to keep doing press to pay the bills.
Right. Right. Okay.
And
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that was, you know, one of the, just even us parting the ways when he first fell off the wagon was one of the hardest things I'd ever gone through. And I'd been Steve's publicist, so they were very much, you know, family, you know, and, you know, I still consider Steve family.
Of course.
So yeah, it was just kind of a natural progression. I still remember Kevin Morris, who manages the Drive By Truckers, one day called me and he goes, I feel like you have better things to do than do tour press. And I'm like, yes, sir, you're right. And that was the end of my PR career. Like, because I'd been with those guys for like 14 years. So it was just, you know, the one thing I didn't want to quite let go of yet. And so, you know, in some ways I'm grateful for Kevin for helping me cut the cord.
I got
you know, and again, I'm still Patterson and I are like brother and sister.
Right.
And then, you know, and then shortly after Justin and I parted ways, I started working with Jason. Mm-hmm. And so things, you know, and again, I still kind of had to keep balancing the PR a little bit because I needed to know I had the money coming in, because things, you know, it was early on with Jason. And, you know, I remember getting this first budget and looking at him and just wanting to throw up. I was like, he's been out working his butt off and there's like no money still at the end of the day.
Right.
So yeah, that was kind of how I made the transition originally.
So the 30 Tigers thing, are you still?
I never worked for them.
Okay.
I worked under their umbrella.
Okay.
So I closed down Grassroots Media and went to be an in-house publicist at New West Records.
Okay.
Where theoretically I was probably paid like one of the guys, but treated like a girl.
Talk about that a little bit. What does that mean?
It means we got a new head of marketing in who, thought he knew better than everybody else. And I could tell that he was trying to, and I was living in LA at the time. And in LA, you have to have warnings with people and have written them up for grounds of termination. And I could tell he was trying to make me trip up.
Right.
The Cameron Strang, who owned the label at the time, never would really approve our travel budgets, and you would have to go into his office and get a verbal okay. And they accused me of going home for AMA to go home, and that I didn't really have any business being there.
Right. Yeah.
And anybody that knows me knows I would never do such a thing.
And I've watched you work AMA, so I know.
Yeah. And so I remember when I called Patterson and told him I was leaving New West, he said, "You don't need to work for the man, any man."
Right.
And so that trip home for AMA, I was starting to figure out what my out might be, because I was feeling the writing on the wall. Mm-hmm. And I had a conversation with Grant Alden from No Depression, and he's like, "You know what, you should talk to David Macias." Mm-hmm. And I went and met with David and just kind of laid out what was going on. And he just, spitballed off the top of his head, "Why don't you reopen your PR company under our umbrella? We'll take a small percentage of what you bring in to cover overhead," and et cetera. And a friend of mine had gone with me to that meeting and waited outside. And he was like, "I don't know what happened, but your shoulders are down." Uh-huh. He could tell. And I was like, yeah, it was a good meeting. So yeah, then I, went in under their umbrella, kind of got first dibs at the projects that would come in. And then I could also bring in my own projects.
Right.
So
does that relationship remain?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. Okay.
To me, David is the smartest, kindest person in this business.
Okay. That was, I've heard him speak, and that was my impression also. And I remember when 30 Tigers started forming, I don't know, when was it,
almost 20 years ago.
Was it that long ago?
Almost, okay. Yeah. Because I was there almost 15 years.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I remember that, and remember knowing kind of I liked the umbrella concept and the way it was a different management style.
Yeah.
That seemed very.
And what he's built is something that really helps artists to have full control of. And it's been great for us, especially during these times, to get those nice checks for him for record sales.
That's awesome. Well, good.
And so when leaving there, I thought about it a couple of times, and it just ultimately was about me kind of creating my own culture. Mm-hmm. And simple as that. We still obviously use them. They're our partner in putting out records. And, if I needed anything, I know David would be the first one to step to the plate and help me out, right. So yeah, we have a great relationship, and I and I've had artists signed to other labels, that did not work out very well. And, and when you and I've gone into those deals thinking this is going to be good, and then found out that no, it's not good. And then when you compare the teams, I put that team up against anybody else.
Right. Right.
Because they're real music lovers, and they know how to sell records in this environment.
Right. I was just thinking too about, back to the earlier statement you made about just always believing that you could do whatever you wanted. And so to be in an environment where, your independence is maintained, but in a supportive climate. Yeah. It's kind of not the business norm, in the larger business world, so that's great. Okay. So one of the things that some of the women I've already talked to, who are artists in the field, as opposed to agents or, other more on the business side of things, they've talked about the importance of seeing more female faces off stage and behind the scenes, both in the technical realm and in the management realm. Have things changed over the last 20 plus years, or do you see a difference? Do you see more female faces in different roles or not? Do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in some ways, I live in a bubble. You get to a certain point, you don't have to be out schmoozing. You just like, again, kind of, I keep my head down and do my job. But like, even in mainstream country, like Luke Bryan and Maren Morris both have female managers, as does Miranda Lambert, so I do feel like I'm seeing more and more female managers. I wish there were more. I wish there were some better managers out there that I could refer people to that come knocking on our door.
Right.
Even when I taught, like I was hoping that some of those kids would turn into, managers, but yeah, I mean, there's a whole movement here of like women in music and trying to make sure that more people, get recognized. And like last night, Marianne, recognized like Rhiannon and a lot of other like young Black country artists.
Right.
In her acceptance speech. So I do think you're seeing more and more of that, but I think, especially in the mainstream country world, that's still just an uphill battle as far as being an artist. Like it.
Right.
And, but Marianne's someone that I have so much respect for because she continues to speak out. That's not the norm in that field, in that world. Yeah. I mean, Jason always has a theory that the chicks had always been themselves. Mm-hmm. That statement wouldn't have been so detrimental to them.
Gotcha. Yeah. I understand.
Yeah. But there, there's a young, mixer, producer, engineer here, Gina Johnson, that we may end up working with that, is just brilliant. And she's 30 years old.
Right.
And, she had been working with the Prynes for a while and John just loved her.
Right.
I get really, and I love that she's 30. When I was 30, I don't think I stood my ground the way she does sometimes. And it just, I feel like this next generation is a little bit more ahead of where we were as far as self-awareness.
Right.
Which I love, and just even self-care. And like, when I was that age, I was just working all the time and I, probably wasn't very healthy.
Right. Yeah. It's inspiring.
Yes. Very much so.
I get it. Who are you listening to right now besides your own folks? Who are you listening to that you're just like, well, I'm excited about that?
I listen a lot. I listen to a lot of old stuff, and this is not my client, but she is a company client, SG Goodman.
Okay.
You have not heard of her.
I haven't, but I need to, right? I'm going to write it down.
You should. She is a Spitfire from Murray, Kentucky, and her record is really, really good. And I'm also proud of Jay that works for me because they put this out in the middle of a pandemic with a brand new artist.
Wow.
And they have left no rock unturned.
Wow. Tell me what it is about her that you love so much.
I love her spunk. She's real sassy. And Jay told me that like he kind of working with me for so long really helped him to learn how to deal with her. So I think that is a compliment. So, but and I really love the record. We listen to it a lot around the house.
That's awesome. Well, I will check it out when we get done tonight. That's great.
Yeah. And we had her scheduled to go on tour with John Moreland. But they, she's also very politically active and outspoken and from Kentucky. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, she's great.
Tell me about the Country Music Hall of Fame.
Oh, the Louise Scruggs.
Tell me about it. It's pretty exciting.
It was pretty exciting. And I think there has since been somebody younger than me, but when I was first, and actually I fought them on it because I really feel like there's a lot of older ladies that we might lose before they have the chance to do something like that. Mm-hmm. So I did actually push back a little bit. But Peter Cooper and Jay Org are dear friends, and they strong armed me into it. But it was a real honor. It's.
Can you describe it for our listeners? What the award is?
It is called the Louise Scruggs Forum, I believe. And Louise to best anybody can tell, was the first female manager in the business. And so they started this in her honor, where they honor a woman once a year in the business. And a few years back, they chose me. And you just get interviewed and you talk about your history. And I got made fun of a lot because I talk with my hands, and everybody kept thinking I was going to hit Peter Cooper in the head.
It wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah. And our friend Aubrey Preston bought Louise's desk at their estate sale and gave it to me. So the desk I use at the office is Louise's.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, what a gift.
It's a complete gift. Yeah.
So I haven't been to the Earl Scruggs Museum in North Carolina yet. I've just heard about it. Do you know, it's down close to Charlotte, I believe. Are you familiar with the?
I'm not, no.
There's a newish museum, and a friend of mine visited it right before the pandemic. I think you can go by appointment now, and that's on my list of things to do. But apparently the whole second floor is a giant display of women in bluegrass, like you wouldn't have seen. It's an Earl Scruggs Museum, but I didn't know about Louise, so perhaps that whole emphasis came out of her part in his career. It sounds like she was a real mover and shaker.
She was, and I was like, anything IBMA or Merlefest related, I never really had to deal with her, but I was always afraid I might have to, and I was completely intimidated. Terrified.
Well, and she probably would have been just fine, right?
Probably, yeah, but I just, she just had this air about her that, yeah, and I have a picture of Earl and I, like, that we put up that night that was probably from IBMA. I think I had purple hair at the time.
Oh, yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
So when you teach, did you say University of Georgia?
University of Georgia, yeah. They call it the MBUS program, the music business.
Nice.
Program.
With your students, do you see, what do you, tell me about your students. What do you see in them?
Well, that was several years back. And so I taught artist management, which was the first time they'd ever offered that course. Mm-hmm. And there's no book, FYI. There's a book, but it's very dated and kind of hilarious, because I tried to use it as a guide to start, since I'd never taught to that extent. I guest lectured, but
right.
And then I filled in for David Lowry, because he was working on his doctorate, I believe, and covered him on promotion and publicity. And some of the kids, it was just kind of an elective, in the Terry College of Business. So, sometimes I'd have these kids that really just, they thought it'd probably be an easy out, like, but there were a lot of young ladies in there.
So if you had advice and you probably did, what advice did you have for those couple of women, or the women that seemed like they might be showing some interest in the field?
Well, one of my firm pieces of advice for anybody is to always be honest. There's so many people in this business that are, like, afraid to have a hard conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as that is done with an approach out of love and respect, it does, it's not easy to do, but you still have to have the conversation.
Right.
And, and I find it's really more so men in the business that are the ones that aren't willing to have those conversations. But I think it's important for everyone across the board to, like, not be afraid to have those kind of conversations.
Right.
And that's why my artists respect me, because they know that I'm always going to tell them the truth.
I gotcha.
And I'll do it in a love and respecting way. And, they may not like it, but they appreciate where it comes from. And
what about in terms of, typically speaking, an agent is getting a percentage of an artist's intake in some way. And so when you start out with a new artist that's not really making any money, you talked about this briefly earlier, that you had to have a way to maintain making a living while you were developing new artists. Can you talk about that balance a little bit?
Yeah, that was, that was many moons ago, but like it was like I actually on my to-do list I would have one side management and one side PR.
Right.
Just trying to make sure I keep that balance. So, it's, and most importantly, like whatever role it's like important to be proactive, because we are so used to like just taking care of what's coming at us all the time that sometimes you have to stop and take a minute and make sure you're being proactive with some of the things that need to be done on your to-do list, because being reactive, and there are plenty of people that have no attention to deadlines and think that their emergency needs to be your emergency.
Right.
I've been, part of it comes with age, but I don't play those games anymore. It's like, just because you waited a year to get this deal done doesn't mean I need to drop everything and do it right now.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That perspective takes a little while, I guess. So
yeah.
Well, is there anything as we thank you again for taking this time, as you thought about talking today or about this topic or anything, is there anything else you wanted to just add or say or were wishing that I would ask?
I mean, I would just encourage, women that want to be in any part of the business just to, like, again, keep your head down and do the work and just don't get discouraged.
Right.
And I still really love my job. I had somebody early on in my career tell me I wouldn't always be this excited. And then I it's like, if I'm not, I need to go do something else.
Right.
But, I still get excited making stuff happen for my people.
Yeah. Well, that's why you're good at your job.
And it just, it just,
yeah.
And sometimes, there have been times in my life where I'm like, maybe I need to do something more meaningful. But music is like therapy and therapeutic for people. So, and when we use that for good, whether it be politically or fundraise or charitable or whatever, we have plenty of ways to do that kind of thing. But like, there were just times where I'm like, should I go work for a nonprofit or something, like do more with my life? But I have no regrets of how.
Oh goodness. No.
I think that started, like, I think that was burnout of PR.
Yeah. Well, we are in really having this conversation with you. I know that, we're going to release it while we're still in COVID restrictions and we're still in the pandemic, but it will last and people will watch it later and people won't always remember, or younger people won't. I don't know. What do you feel like there's a way that music, in particular the artists that you represent, tend to be very not, I don't want to speak across the board, but their work is from their heart. And what role do you see for that music in these times?
Well, that's where I feel like I come in and I be that conduit to take their art and get it to as many people as possible. Like that's why we didn't, Jason's record was scheduled to come out in May. We didn't even think twice about not putting it out.
Right.
Because I see the emails, like I get emails from fans about how much his music means to them. And to me, it was important to get it out there because I thought in these times, this is something that's going to be helpful. And then we've started releasing live shows on Bandcamp.
Right.
And we've kept it coming and the emails come in and they're like, this is getting me through.
Right.
And especially the live music, we can't go to shows feeling that and hearing the audience is the closest people can get to it right now.
Right. Right.
So that's where I come in and it's like, making sure that gets out to people, and because it's, especially his, and John too, like their music just really touches people.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's just important to get it out there in whatever form we can right now.
I hear you. Amen, sister.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate this conversation and I appreciate your hard work and I appreciate how hard you work to put the art out there for your folks and for people like me who are their fans.
Well, I'm a fan too. So.
Very good. All righty. Well, it was lovely to talk to you tonight. Is there anything else you want to say? Are you good? You good?
I think that's it.
Okay. Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you very much. You have a good evening.